All right, we seem to have hit a critical mass. So, welcome everyone. We're delighted that you are with us today. My name is Jonathan Sauls. I'm the Senior Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, and we're really pleased as a unit to sponsor a series of seminars on a variety of mental health topics. Today's is one that I think we can all benefit from, and we're excited to be offering that for you. Again, just as a reminder, if you're an undergraduate student and you're looking to obtain a CLA credit in association with your attendance today, there will be additional information at the end of this seminar that you'll be able to scan a QR code and get the information so you can submit that in an appropriate way. Also want to remind you that both the chat function, the Q&A function are going to be up and running. We invite you to throw questions in there that you might have. I'll be monitoring that along with my colleagues. And there'll be a formal Q&A session at the end of the presentation from Dr. Hextall in just a few moments that you'll be able to ask questions and share those things with the group. There may also be some opportunities as we go through some of the exercises for you to just provide some responses through, so feel free to use that chat function. We're really glad that, again, that you're here, and it's my privilege to introduce our guest presenter today. A licensed psychologist, Dr. Caroline Hextall has extensive experiences at the intersection of lifespan development, well-being, and mindfulness. She trained at the universities of Kansas and South Carolina and completed her fellowship at UNC's Carolina Institute for Developmental Disabilities. Dr. Hextall is the founder of the Center for Mindful Development, where she integrates evidence-based psychology and mindfulness to support children, adolescents, and the community. In addition, she is the psychologist at RSI Community in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where she serves individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Dr. Hextall, we're really glad to have you here today, and I am particularly interested in this topic. So thank you for giving us your time.
You're very welcome. It's nice to be here, and thank you for the invite. So, all right. Okay, so I am going to be talking to you a little bit about mindfulness specifically, but I wanted to go back a little bit in terms of what got me interested in this field and sort of what the pathway was for me. I think I've always been curious about what is going on in people's minds, and how that relates to how we act and how we think, and how we relate to one another. And so when I was an undergrad at University of Kansas, I took a class in cognitive psychology and was just hooked. The information that was being shared about memory and executive functioning, long-term memory, short-term memory, and all of the thought processes that just are operating constantly in our minds, was just fascinating to me. And so that led to switching my degree, switching my major, sort of midstream, into psychology, which I loved and was thrilled to be able to get into that field. Um, then I went into a field of school psychology, which really helped me understand more through assessment and understanding into intelligence and, um, also learning and children's learning capacity and things like that, which was fascinating from a different angle. And then I was really interested in the field of intellectual and developmental disabilities and sort of how does this interact with thinking and learning and when a brain is just different. Um, that led to a postdoc at UNC, which was wonderful, and I got experience in doing something called DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, with individuals with intellectual disabilities. And one core component of DBT is mindfulness, sometimes called wise mind, and it incorporates mindfulness at its core, essentially. And then that led to taking a class, mindfulness-based stress reduction at UNC, which then just further grew. So it really started with understanding what is going on in people's minds, a lot of self-reflection, what is happening in my mind. And sort of the common thread, I think, through that and what I've come to understand is that really to best understand what's happening in our minds is to observe it and really watch it, but watch it from a position of non-judgment. and with curiosity and with wonder. So, if we look at sort of a basic definition of mindfulness, mindfulness is at its essence being fully present. And so, throughout this presentation, I will likely be using mindfulness, the term mindfulness, awareness, and also presence somewhat interchangeably. However, it's important to know that there are distinct differences between each of these concepts, but we'll just, for the purposes of this presentation, I want for us to kind of have a common grounding on what mindfulness is, and it is being present in a way that is open, attentive. So there is an aspect of focus in mindfulness, non-judgmental, which is really key, and I'll continue to come back to that. And then also just being aware. So the awareness aspect is kind of reflects that openness aspect. There's curiosity, nothing is really excluded. When we judge something, we might be excluding it. And so that's why this aspect of non-judgment is really key. When we start paying attention to how much we judge or question whether or not we are judging, we realize, oh, I'm kind of judging a lot. And there's nothing inherently wrong with judgment. It's just that when we evaluate every thought or every behavior or every aspect of who we are as people, then we can get, it can sort of snowball, and we can get into some sticky situations and a lot of harsh judgment towards ourselves. So, just to really sort of ground in this particular definition, that it's being really fully present with whatever is happening. Sometimes we say what is, or what is now, or what is here and now. And what that is really implying is that our minds may go in multiple different directions with what is here and now, but we can always come back to what is. So there's some other aspects of mindfulness, certainly the non-judgment piece, which is really key. And then there's this aspect called beginner's mind. If you think about maybe the first time that you came into a class, like a new class this semester, or the first time you moved into your dorm room or your apartment, or the first time you really did anything, that in all likelihood there was a sort of a state that you were in that was curious, that was open, that was like you were beginning something. It was the start of something. And that state that you're in is different than maybe the 30th time that you've entered a room, or the second time even that you've entered a room, and certainly different than the 100th time or the 1,000th time that you've entered a room, or the 1,000th time that you've seen your partner, or seen your child, or seen a professor of yours. We start to see the individual that we're with, or see the experience that we're having from a place of all of the memories that we may have, or all the imaginations of what could have been or what could be, sort of that future-oriented thinking. But from this stance of beginner's mind, we are entering into this experience. We are meeting this person with brand new eyes, so to speak. It's very difficult to do, but if we remember and if we put ourselves in this state of, I'm going to begin this as if this were the first time I've done it, or I'm going to meet this person as if this is the first time that I've ever seen them, then we are incorporating this more mindful approach. We are incorporating, and we are in a more mindful state when we say, okay, I'm going to approach this with beginner's mind. Another aspect is non-striving. So much of our lives are spent in striving towards something, in reaching for success, so to speak, or looking towards an outcome. And in mindfulness, with a more mindful approach or in a mindful state, we are not striving for any outcome. This is really difficult to do. And it's not one of those things that we try to achieve because then we would be striving. So but the aspect of non-striving is to accept that, I'm just going to see what happens. There's no excuse me, real expectation of what could happen in the end. It is purely about, okay, what is happening right now in this moment? And then if there is a thought of, hey, I really hope that this happens in the end, then there's awareness of that thought. But there's not an energy, so to speak, towards I'm going to purposely do XYZ in order to get a particular outcome. A lot of times, we may have this image of what a mindful person looks like. A lot of times it is an image of somebody in a meditative pose or super relaxed, not having any care in the world, so to speak. And so when we start to engage in some mindfulness practices, or maybe we try meditation, seated meditation, or something of that nature, we're not getting anything, or we don't feel like we're getting anything. And so we feel like, oh, well, I guess I can't do meditation, or I guess I can't be mindful. And we give up. And that's really sad. It's too bad because, again, if we go back to mindfulness being truly just what is here right now, something is always here. It could be frustration, it could be feeling sweaty, it could be feeling restless, it could be feeling angry that somebody is telling you you need to do this. So when we put an outcome or when we put an expectation on a practice or in mindfulness specifically, we start being non-mindful. And so that's why non-striving is really important, that we just have this attitude of, I'm just going to see what happens. It could be anything. And it really truly could be anything. Whatever it is that's happening in the moment is what you can be mindful of. And then the fourth one, just on this slide, there are also many other aspects of mindfulness, sort of tenets that people talk about, but I just picked these four to start with. But this fourth one is acceptance. So how do we accept what it is that's happening in this moment, as it is, even if it's something that we don't want, even if it's something that we may not agree with? Acceptance, sometimes we can confuse acceptance with agreeing with it and with liking it. But really, at the heart of it, it is just accepting it for as it is. Again, this is difficult for us to do, for our minds to sort of wrap our minds around accepting something that we may not like. But if you can sort of suspend, again, going back to these judgments, you can sort of suspend those judgments or these beliefs that we have about what is happening or how we are in a certain moment, and we just accept it, there is a real sense of release and sort of peace that we may feel and ease. Um, and so that gets into sort of what the effects are of mindfulness, or what many people describe the effects are of when they feel more mindful, when they are mindful. So a lot of times we can confuse mindfulness with sort of taking control of our thoughts. So I want to make sure that we address a little bit about what mindfulness is not. We are not trying to stop our thinking. We really can't stop our thinking, just as we can't stop our stomach from digesting, from our heart from beating. We really can't stop our minds from thinking. This is just what minds do. They produce thoughts. These are the chemical reactions that are happening in our brain. So when we think about now thought stopping is a technique in sometimes in DBT and in other treatments and interventions. And so so that thought stopping is a particular technique, but when we're talking about mindfulness, we are not talking about stopping our thoughts because we just can't. What we're really doing is if you imagine sort of what it would be like to sit on the bank of a river or to watch the ocean, we would never think, oh, well, let me try to stop that wave, or let me try to stop that branch from coming down the river. It just is impossible. And so the more we believe that we can stop our thoughts, the less mindful we actually are. So if folks might be thinking, well, gosh, I really thought that I could stop my thoughts with mindfulness, just attend to maybe the disappointment that comes up with, oh, I don't know that I really want to engage in mindfulness if I can't stop my thoughts. Again, bringing it back to what is coming up. Just as we can't really stop our thoughts, we can't get rid of our thoughts. We can change our thoughts and sort of shape them and tweak them a little bit, but that's different than throwing them out. We really cannot throw out our thoughts. Just as once a wave has happened in an ocean, we can't say, okay, well, let me get rid of that wave. It comes and it goes and it comes and it goes. So what actually happens is when you are mindful of your thoughts, you do watch that and you see and you come to this realization that, oh, wow, okay, I can't actually toss out this thought. But when I watch it, come, when I watch it sort of emerge in my mind and just see what happens with it, it actually does dissipate and it disappears. But that's slightly different than getting rid of it. And then controlling our thoughts. A lot of times we want to sort of wrestle with the thoughts that we have and force ourselves to think something more positive or force ourselves to think, be maybe more discerning about something. But it's important to recognize that we're not actually controlling, we're not manipulating the thought. We are then thinking a new thought. And so then and a new thought is emerging. So it's sometimes it's a little difficult to understand these differences, but I think it's still important to remember that this is not about control. This is not about grasping a particular thought that we have in our minds and, judging it for what it is and then saying, oh, I'm never going to have that thought again. It's just really a tall order and almost impossible. Okay, what I'd like to do now is do a little practice. This is very simple. It's very directive, but I think it will just help sort of everybody get a sense of, okay, well, what is this like? What does it feel like to actually direct your attention to something? Um, I'm going to just name certain body parts this is sort of a guided meditation or guided mindfulness practice, but this is something that you can do at any time, any moment of the day, with anyone, by yourself, etc. It doesn't matter really where you are. And just go see if you can sort of shift the stance that you're in, sort of the state that you're in from whatever it is, maybe paying attention to my voice, etc., or paying attention to some noises around you, to what it is that I'm telling you to pay attention to, and sort of what that feels like, or what you notice about that. So first, you can close your eyes if you want to. I'm probably going to keep my eyes open just for sake of paying attention to the screen. But you're welcome to close your eyes if that feels comfortable. You don't need to. But whether your eyes are open or whether they're closed, sort of bring your attention to your feet. And just notice, are your feet, you may ask yourself, are my feet on the floor? Are they on a cushion? Are they on an ottoman? Are they on carpet, on hardwood? What does it feel like in your feet? It's such a sometimes an odd question, but we don't really pay attention to our feet very often. What do you know? What other thoughts come up when I say pay attention to your feet? And now bring your attention to your big toe on your right foot. And notice how when I give those directions, your attention is likely drawn to your big toe on your right foot, but you don't necessarily have to move it. You don't have to wiggle it, although that may be a response to the direction. Um, you may recognize that, oh, I don't even have to touch it. I don't have to look at it to know that, oh, yeah, this is my big toe on my right foot. So just notice that. And now also notice, does it bring up your attention or your focus or your awareness to anything else? Like, do you suddenly start to notice, oh, after I noticed my big toe, I kind of noticed my heel? Or I kind of am now curious, what does my left foot feel like? What does the big toe on my left foot feel like? What else is she going to ask me to pay attention to? Maybe that's coming to mind. Or notice if there's a judgment. Notice if there's a, this is weird. I've never paid attention to my foot like this before. I don't know if I like this. Anything can come up. And to then be careful not to judge the judgment, which we can fall into a trap with as well. So now pay attention to your breathing. Draw your focus to whether or not you are on an in-breath or whether you are on an out-breath, sometimes called inhalation versus an exhalation. Notice when I bring up each of those words, what happens internally? Does it feel like you need to shift to one or the other? Or does it feel just comfortable to just breathe? Now pay attention to your elbow. Notice the sensations around your elbow. Notice that it doesn't necessarily need to be your right elbow or your left elbow. You can pick which one. There's no direction. You can choose. What does it feel like to choose? Does it feel like, are you wearing a short sleeve shirt where you feel just the air around your elbow? Or do you feel maybe the scratchiness of your shirt or sweater or sweatshirt? And just linger in that sensation for a moment, in that focus. And now bring your attention back to your breath. Breathe in and breathe out, maybe slowing your breath a little bit. Okay. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. So if you can, just take a few moments to sort of note what it is that you're experiencing right now. Maybe there's gratitude for shifting gears and getting off of this. Maybe there's eagerness for what's coming next. Just note it, maybe either jot it down in the chat or jot it down on a piece of paper so we can kind of come back to that a little bit later. Okay. I'm not going to go into what that was like right now, but we'll talk about that in conjunction with some other things, other practices as well. Okay, so we're shifting gears pretty significantly. So we're going to go from sort of a mindfulness exercise where we're attending to something as small, really, as our elbow or as our big toe, stuff that we hardly ever think about, right? To stress. Um, you might notice, what was it like to have that sort of quick shift from maybe a relaxed state or a state where, you felt like your heart rate was settling or you were breathing more deeply to now we have to talk about stress? What is that like? So the reason why we talk about stress in a mindfulness presentation is because mindfulness is really sort of to say it's an antidote is not, it's not great, but let's just think of it sort of as an antidote because it is able to dissipate the stress quite rapidly and quite effectively. Um, so we have stressors in our daily life throughout our every day. Some of them, and we want to distinguish, good stressors and maybe not so good stressors. This is a natural part of life. There are things that bring on a reaction within us, and then there are things that activate us in some way that we may have a response to, or we may have a reaction to. And then there are things that we don't have a reaction to. And then some increase our stress levels and some just sort of bypass us. We may notice them and they may increase a response or a reaction, but they don't necessarily increase our stress level. So right now, what I want to talk about is the stressors. So maybe you walk into class and the professor says, we're having a test today. And immediately what happens is probably thoughts about the stressor. So thoughts about the test, thoughts about the exam, thoughts of maybe, oh no, I didn't study. I didn't even realize there was an exam today. Thoughts of, oh no, I've done poorly on past exams. So we reach back into the past and then suddenly we throw ourselves into the future of, oh no, I'm going to fail this exam or I'm going to fail this class. What does that, then we can balloon it even further into what does that mean about me? What does that mean about me as a student, etc. There is something evolutionarily we have adapted because of what is simplistically called the negativity bias. We tend toward the negative of something. There are many reasons for this. It's evolutionary. We adapted to this. It's part of why we're here and able to develop our prefrontal cortex. But just know that we err on the side of thinking more negatively than we really need to. And so, in other words, we are biased towards the negative. So, why that matters is because the thoughts that start ballooning often are negative, more negative in nature than they are positive in nature. We can shift that. We can shift that bias more towards the positive end or just the neutral end, even. But it takes practice. It takes repeated practice to do that, which is where mindfulness comes in. So if we want to intervene in this, you can see this arrow kind of going up and to the right and increasing the cortisol level, which is our stress hormone that is released, which is, again, it's kind of, cortisol has sort of gotten a bad rap at times because we associate it so much with negative stress and declining health and how it affects our health, etc. But we need cortisol. It activates energy when we need it during these stress responses. So it's not all bad. It's just that if we have too much of it for too long and it becomes chronic, then it has these deleterious effects on our body. So if we can minimize the increase of it, the better. So if we think about this map again of how we have a thought, about this stressor, what often happens, and I bet everyone can probably relate to this, is that then we have thoughts about the thought. And then that grows, and we have thoughts about the thoughts about the thought. And so we're pretty soon, it's this exponential growth of thoughts and of things that we really probably can't even control, things that are tend toward the negative, ideas about us as people and about our future, etc. So this is overthinking, essentially. And we have, as humans, we have noticed the plight of overthinking for thousands of years. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." I think that's what that says. Yes, reality. Overthinking, and then James Clear, modern researcher, popular in the popular press, especially, overthinking is the art of solving problems you don't have. So if we go back to the this slide of the thoughts about the thought and how it balloons, this is the overthinking. And the more that we think about these stressors and the thoughts about the stressors, our stress level continues to just increase and increase. So again, how do we get out of that? How do we get out of that pattern? So if you think about a stressor as a stimulus, which it is, and we encounter stimuli throughout our day, there's something that can happen in between. So we may have the stimulus and then we have the response. But there is this place in between that offers an opportunity. A lot of times in guided meditations or in any sort of mindfulness exercise that you might be exposed to, or a guide, a teacher may suggest or may say something to the effect of, "This is your invitation. This is an invitation to do something different." And the invitation is represented in that blue square, blue rectangle with the question mark. We say it's sort of an invitation because it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to pause. It's an opportunity to say, I can make a different choice. I have this stressor, I have the stimulus, I have something that's activating me, or I have something that is sort of asking for a response or a reaction from me. But how am I going to respond? That's where we have this choice. So this quote is often attributed to Viktor Frankl. I just learned recently that there is question whether or not he didn't think that he said it, but nonetheless, it's attributed to him, and it's such a great quote. Between stimulus and response lies a space, and visually, I made that into that blue rectangle. In that space lie our freedom and power to choose a response. So there's this idea that we can choose how it is that we respond. And in our response lies our growth and our happiness. So not only can we choose to grow in this moment, which means inherently struggle, because if there's not struggle, or if there's not if there's not friction, in other words, growth rarely happens. We just remain stagnant. And it's that growth and it's that sort of choosing that response that we have that leads to our happiness. There's also something about this quote in terms of the happiness that I'll get into a little bit later, in terms of, okay, what is it like? Why is it that so much research proves over and over and over, or the findings of research over and over, is that when we are present, when we are aware, when we are in the present moment, as opposed to in the future-oriented thinking, and as opposed to in the past, and sort of rehashing memories, etc., that people report the greatest levels of happiness, the greatest levels of life satisfaction. So there is something really important about that space, about that pause, about that stopping that really does lead to people feeling happier. It's kind of it's not what we are told, it's not what we even think a lot of the times because we believe quite strongly, and we try to prove it to ourselves over and over and over that if we get XYZ, if we get this particular vehicle, if we get this particular job, if we get this particular partner, if we change this particular partner, then that will equal happiness. But it's like we have to, relive that over and over and over to really realize, oh, maybe this isn't actually where happiness lies. Because in much of the research around life satisfaction and well-being and happiness and joy, et cetera, people report that it is, in studies, especially in the field of positive psychology, where people sometimes are reporting moment to moment happiness levels, et cetera, satisfaction with their lives, their levels of joy, et cetera. And then they ask, well, what is it that you're doing? It's sometimes very mundane things. It's not necessarily that they've just landed a promotion or that they've just gotten married or they've just had the birth of their first child, even though those things certainly are happy events. It is really well, I was just lying on the grass and staring up at the clouds and enjoying the fresh air. It could be that, or it could be I was driving and really attending to the feel of the steering wheel in my hands, or I was washing dishes, or I was lacing up my shoes. It's these tiny little moments where there's the stimulus and then there's the response, but it truly is an invitation. It is an opportunity to really soak in what it is that we're experiencing in that present moment. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit more into sort of the science of this. So what is happening? What is happening? Why is it that that space in between that blue rectangle, that question mark, that sort of opening, that invitation, how is it that we can change that? Is it really possible to change that? For many, many years, we have just assumed that the greatest time and really the only time of when we can change the brain is early childhood. And that is incredibly important. Still, 0 to 7 is like the time that we really need to maximize for young brains, to have rich experiences with people socially, being able to play as much as they can. That is a tremendous period of time in a child's life and growth of brain development. It's critical. It's one of those critical windows of time that we really need to maximize in terms of their brain development and social emotional development, et cetera. But it's not exclusive to that age frame. That the more we learn, the more we study brains, the more we realize that, wow, even at 25, even at 45, even at 75, our brain still has the capacity to reorganize structurally and functionally through learning and experience. It is pretty remarkable. So this concept is called neuroplasticity. And it's, neurons, the brain cells, plastic, meaning it's not hardwired. There are some things that are kind of hardwired, but we know now that through fMRIs and through other imaging, et cetera, that through learning and experience, through practice, through repeated practice, and through multiple experiences, we actually do change our brain. it has remarkable implications for trauma, for past trauma that people have experienced, to be able to recover and to heal from past experiences. It's really, I mean, it's a game changer. It's absolutely a game changer. So here is a video clip of a brain cell reaching out for connections. This is what is happening when we are learning something new, when we are acquiring new information, when we're practicing something that we're bad at in the beginning, but over time, the more and more we practice it, it's kind of a numbers game. That if you just keep doing it over and over and over, I mean, I bet people on this call have really experienced this, whether it was riding a bike when you were 7 or 8 or 10 or 15 or 25, learning to swim. Anytime you've learned anything, there is this feeling of like, oh, it's so hard in the beginning. It is hard in the beginning because there aren't any connections. Your brain literally hasn't made these connections with this particular skill or this knowledge base. But then the more you do it, you can just, as I'm talking, I'm going to be playing this. There's no sound to this. This is just imaging. But you can see each of those little nodes are just reaching out. So you can imagine that when you're practicing something new, that's what's happening, carving out these new pathways. Oh, should I go here? Should I go there? These little neurons are saying, okay, what's going to lead to this particular outcome? Even though you're not that the neuron's not thinking, oh, well, I need to have it be XYZ. It's just reaching out, right? It's just practicing. It's should I go here? Should I go there? What is it like if I go here? So it's really important. That just illustrates neuroplasticity, and that's what's happening when we're learning. Okay. Um, Now we're going to do a different exercise. And I cannot see the chat, but I'm going to ask either Jonathan or Sarah to, after this exercise, just to read out loud what it is that folks have texted in the chat. I'm going to do a little demonstration first. So this is a little exercise called What is Now? And it's just as simple as it sounds. So, so I'm going to demonstrate it. And this is, again, one of these practices that you can truly do anytime, anywhere, by yourself or with other people. And I'm just going to illustrate it for like 15 seconds, and then we're going to take about a minute to have you all do it. So, what is now? Coffee mug, AirPods, floor, breath, blinking, hands, watch. Okay, so that's it. So the instructions are literally to just whatever kind of comes to mind, whether it's a sensation, whether it's a thought, whether it's a feeling, whether it's something that you observe in the environment, to just type it in the chat. And you can type it multiple times. So, one of the things that you might notice is typing or is fingers on the keyboard, the sound of typing. So you might notice that that may be something that gets typed in. So just try. Oh wait, now I can actually see the chat. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so if you can just, there's no judgment about whatever is coming up for you. If you can just, it could be truly as random as it comes. Just as you're awesome. There we go. Okay, keep going. Great. Okay, I'm gonna just pause talking for about 30 seconds and then I'm gonna come back. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to read these. These are awesome. Okay. Um, talking, lamp, phone, cup, oatmeal, juice, food, feeling full, flower, phone case, watch, snack, perfume, code, remote, cup, glasses, birds chirping, code 3, screen, mouse, chili, pink bottle, washing machine sound, AC, hot, sneezing, nose, phone, book, headphones, cars, cold, reading, phone, right side of head or brain, headboard. Excellent. This is awesome. So that is all it is. And so that is such a simple, like in any moment, if you're starting to feel like a stressor has come on, or somebody has walked in the room and maybe you're kind of not feeling so great about that person, just bring it back to, okay, what am I feeling? What is now? Not liking, nervous, whatever it is. And that really brings it to the present moment. And what we have found in a lot of research is that when we just actually name what it is that we're feeling or what we're experiencing or what we're noticing, it dissipates. It doesn't have the same charge that it does. Now, you might have to play around with that yourself to see, okay, is that really true? Because it can feel like, well, that seems really too good to be true or too simple, or how does that work? But just know that try it. Just experiment with it. See what it does for you. Okay, if you could now also put in the chat a little bit about what it is that you feel after doing that particular exercise. What does it feel? Just anything. I see a question of, does it work even if it's a negative observation? Absolutely. Negatives are actually better. Secure, aware, grounded, calm, feels present. Wonderful. Confirmed. Yeah, awake. Yeah. Yeah, so that's it. Just it's enough of a shift. It's just it seems really simple, but it's just enough of a shift that I don't want to go all the way back to the slide before, but I could. But if you can just bring it to your mind, that slide about the thoughts and about the stressors. So there's that stressor, and then there's the thought about the stressor. If we just stay with what it is, okay, what is it that I'm feeling in this particular moment? What is now? What is present? Then we don't get so lost in the future and so lost in the past. Okay, what is reorganizing? This is going back to, thank you so much for your participation, by the way. This is odd. Usually I can see all the participants, and so I can see facial expressions and things like that. Um, so I really appreciate getting the feedback in the chat. So thank you. Okay, what is reorganizing in our brains? Like something is happening, right? Something clearly happened because you saw a change, right? You probably saw sort of a shift, or you felt the shift, and that's what's even more important. Okay, so when we are not meditating, meaning when we are not mindful, which is most of the time, our brains are using what's called the default mode network. And this is these interconnected regions. So it's a network, right? So they're connected parts of our brain that are typically involved in self-reflection, and self-reflection in sort of a like, not woe is me, but like sort of not self-important necessarily, but it's very inward focused, without really seeing sort of what's around us and seeing big picture type stuff. Mind wandering, future oriented thought, and retrospective memories. So basically memories. It's not bad. This part of the more we've researched mindfulness and the more we've started to understand about what's actually happening in the brain level, and also through study, neurobiology, et cetera, sometimes it can be framed that this particular network is how do we tamp that down? How do we limit it as much as possible? We really don't want to limit it as much as possible. We want to sort of keep it so it doesn't get activated or overly activated all the time. But it's still really critical to how we think and how we operate in our lives. It's that meditation, what meditation does, or just those exercises that you've done. A lot of times, seated meditation is how we practice really intentionally focusing on mindful awareness. But you can see that you can do a mindful exercise and your state shifts. There's reduced activation of the default mode network. So it's not that it's not offline, or I mean, it's not that it's offline completely. It's just a little reduced in its activation, which is kind of what we want. And because the meditation increases the activation of these more controlled regions, leading to greater emotional regulation, attention regulation, behavior regulation, we are able to see, okay, this is my perspective. This may be somebody else's perspective. How can I appreciate that? How can I understand that? How can I have compassion for myself? It leads to not only these trait changes and structural changes, but it leads to not only the state changes, which you all experience sort of this shift in, okay, and I feel a little bit different. I feel more alert. I feel more focused. I feel more at ease. I feel more at peace, etc. But it also actually leads to structural changes in the brain. So the brain the structures are actually changing. Some are getting larger, some are getting smaller. And they've found that out through fMRI mostly for meditators who've been meditating for decades, 20, 30 years, et cetera, that the structures of their brains are actually changing. Okay, so meditation and mindfulness, sort of, again, most of the time when we think of mindfulness, you do a Google search and almost all the images with the word mindfulness that come up are of the similar to the woman on the left who's meditating in that yoga pose, the lotus position. But I really want to challenge you to think other ways of thinking about mindfulness and how to bring this awareness to washing dishes, to reading, to studying, to looking out the window, to doing anything, to playing with your dog or your cat or animal or something, that in any of these moments we can be mindful. We can bring this attention to whatever it is that we're doing. We don't have to think of ourselves as needing to find a meditation cushion and sitting down and doing a 30-minute meditation. That's lovely if you can do it, and if the practice is there, it's life-changing. But you don't necessarily have to start there. And I think that's what is really important to remember. Okay, thinking about happiness and life satisfaction, why does this matter? Again, going back to, study after study showing that the more time we stay in the present as opposed to in the future and in the past, the more happy we are, the happier we are. It's just been shown so many times. It is very simple to be happy, but it is very difficult to be simple. I think this is the best quote I've found because it is so appropriate. It sort of leaves us remembering, oh yeah, it's really hard to be simple, but truly being simple, it is sort of the pathway to happiness, which then sort of leads to overall life satisfaction. So, okay, how do you ease the difficulty of practice? Um, Anticipate doubt, anticipate resistance. Expect yourself, if you've never done this, if you've never practiced mindfulness or meditation before, or if you've done it, 10 years, I suspect that there still is doubt. There still could be, these resistance to, maybe not as much doubt if you've been doing it for a long time, but likely there's resistance. It just happens. It happens because we get busy doing other things and we feel like, it would take time for me to do this, etc. Know that that's going to happen. Just like, anytime you do some kind of lifestyle change, know that there's going to be a part of you that really struggles with it, that thinks, this isn't going to really work, or I don't really want to do that. That's okay. Have that be the practice. Have that be, it doesn't mean that mindfulness isn't working. It's just that then you become mindful of that. So you become mindful of, oh, what is it like to not want to do this? What is it like to believe we don't have time? I don't have time. Um, Remember that negativity bias, that's going to creep up for sure. Start small. Start with these tiny little moments of what is now, what's happening right in this very moment, what's happening with my eyebrows, for example. That's it. That shifts your attention back to, okay, what actually is happening right now? Consistency with practice, if you can get going with that. Here is a simple, this kind of repeats a little bit of what we have done in these practices. First, just stop. Sometimes it's so hard for us to stop when we're kind of going on a momentum and we've got motivation to keep going. But what is it like to just stop? What does it feel like? What happens next when you just press pause? Find your breath. Often that is what we find initially, what we pay attention to. That's what's often. I didn't have the direction be to pay attention to your breathing, mostly because that is you can find that really anywhere. And sometimes our breath is not the place to focus. Sometimes due to many different reasons, we don't feel safe in our breathing, or it just doesn't feel like we can really attend to that with intentional focus. So that's why I threw in, just the other, your toe, your elbow, etc., your eyebrows. You can also attend to that. But breathing, the breath in and of itself is a world of mindfulness. So there are a lot of reasons why we do say focus on your breath. Just repeat over and over, what is now, what am I noticing, etc. Okay, gratitude, which is also a huge part of life satisfaction and happiness. Gratitude arises from paying attention, from being awake in the presence of everything that lives within us, without us, and beside us. Here are a couple other, transitions to try to practice opening the car door to sitting in the seat. It's often these transitions that really bypass us really quickly. But if you can start paying attention to these particular transitions, that can really bring some mindfulness to the daily, your daily lives. Okay, so one other aspect of what I wanted to talk about just really briefly is how we are in a moment, how we feel internally affects everyone around us. So know that the time and the energy that's spent on attending to you and what it is that is processing in your mind, that if that is taken care of, and literally cared for and have compassion for and attended to, that has these ripple effects. And that's how it affects our community. It affects your home life. It affects, your pet. It affects, the people on your street and the people in your community. Okay, we will shift gears to I think to Jonathan for questions or anybody else. I can stop my share. Yeah, so what questions do people have?
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Hex. And certainly remind folks, both the Q&A and the chat feature is available. So if you have questions you'd like to pose, I suspect anything's fair game in terms
Yeah,
of
totally.
just sort of general questions about what you saw or how it might relate to some of the things. As people are sort of contemplating that, let me just ask something that is often, I think, on the minds of a lot of us, and that is, we're on a campus that really promotes achievement. We have outstanding students. We have really high achieving staff. How do we reconcile the desire or even need to be mindful with this unrelenting sense of being productive?
Yeah. So that's one of the questions that most people ask, and it's also one of the most common barriers to beginning a practice. And that is, I'm so busy, how could I ever fit this into my schedule? And it's a legitimate question because in our minds, we see time sort of spliced into different segments, and it's occupied, right? It's there's time for studying this, there's time for doing this particular Zoom meeting, there's time for doing this meeting with this colleague, etc. But it requires a little bit of a shift in thinking about what time gives you, and it really does give you this space to say, if I were to pay attention to my breathing for 30 seconds, what happens? So sometimes there is an initial curiosity of okay, what would my productivity, what would my outcomes for today be like if I did stop for 30 seconds? And then just to experiment with it. That's often more valuable than signing up for a 7 day, okay, I'm going to do these meditations for 20 minutes a day. Because invariably, we feel like we are being controlled by an app, or we're being controlled by some course, or we're being controlled by something else. And when we feel pressure to, do it well or something like that, that's the time that it goes out the window. And that's the time we say, well, see, I didn't have time to do this. But just to really question, like, what does it feel like to pause for 30 seconds before I get into the car or before I start the car? What does that feel like? Okay. And then, okay, now I'm going to do it again. Now I'm going to see what it feels like now. To really, the place of curiosity and wonder will lead to a greater practice than anything, than really any online course or anything like that. That can then lead, I mean, for some people, they just need that online course and they need that disciplined or something like that. But what I have found for most people is that it's the willingness to try something different and to say, you know what, let me just see what happens if I do sit and just see what it is that my breathing pattern is doing for the next 30 seconds.
Mhm.
And that's it. The other idea to just play around with is that we are never not being productive. Like, our hearts are beating, our brain is functioning, our digestive system is digesting, our nervous system is being productive right now. So we can never not be not productive. So just remember that because sometimes we can judge ourselves for, oh man, I missed out on this again, or I missed out on that. Just remember, just have a whole lot of compassion for yourself for wanting to try something different. Try it, see what happens, and then just go with it. See what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely good advice. We've got some good questions that are showing up in the Q&A. Both William and Logan sort of ask a similar question, and that's how do you go about goal setting and thinking about the future, something that I know is really important to our students, while also staying mindful and present and not getting too absorbed with the things down the road.
Yes, that's great. So, a lot of times people worry that they won't be able to make lists when they are going to be mindful. But no, it's just that you are mindful in that task. If you're thinking about, let's say you want to apply for an internship and you know that you have to, meet certain criteria, or you need to email this person, or you need to write a cover letter or something like that. That can all be done still focused on what is it like to imagine going on this internship? What is it like to, imagine studying abroad? And okay, what is it that I need to do? It's so you can still be, it's odd, it's sort of paradoxical, but you can still be present in the future thinking, but you're still just grounded in, okay, what is it? Yeah, what do I notice? What are the judgments? What are the worries that are coming up about maybe I won't get this internship? What would that be like? Okay, well, now I'm thinking about that. Now let me bring it back to, oh, yeah, I'm excited about this internship. I'm excited about pursuing this. That's what that feels like. It's not that, sometimes we believe that we're just going to be, bumps on a log and not get anything done if we practice mindfulness. But it's really the opposite that happens because we we engage the part of our brain that is able to regulate our attention system much better. We are able to regulate our emotions and our behaviors much better when we have a mindful state. And so really it's short-term investment for a long-term gain. So
Makes a lot of sense. Ayla in the Q&A also asked about, so are there some additional accessible resources that you might recommend or practices or exercises for folks who are interested in learning more and engaging in more mindfulness?
yeah. So I know that the program in integrative medicine has a number of courses that they offer at UNC. And then also, I mean, there are a lot of online resources actually that are quite beneficial. There are apps that are helpful. It's just, I think Headspace being one that I know a lot of people have found helpful. Um, there are a lot of books, and I meant to create sort of a resource list, and I'm happy to put that together that I can send out, and you all can disperse however you want to, maybe on your website or something like that. But there are a lot of apps, again, and online resources, guided meditations, etc. I think my recommendation would be to sort of be, this is these two recommendations are opposite sort of, but be picky but also open-minded. So if something doesn't strike you as like if it doesn't resonate with you, if the voice of the person leading the meditation or the script or something like that doesn't fit, you just kind of feel like you feel resistant to it, keep looking. Get curious about, okay, well, let me open this up even more, because it's not going to be about the voice. It's not going to be about the script that you're going to read. It's not going to be about the author. It will be more about your experience. It will be more about, okay, how am I connecting to myself in this moment? How am I really being present with whatever it is that I'm feeling and how I'm reacting to this particular voice? So there's no silver bullet. There's no, golden key to getting, yourself to meditate. It's truly about a practice. It's truly about what do I want to get out of this? But also, why do I have that aspiration to get something out of it? So it's a lot of internal reflection in a way of observing, of witnessing, of looking at and questioning.
Yeah.
So,
And I gather you don't have to have it all figured out day one, right?
oh my gosh.
As a practice, it is something that you just sort of continue to develop and develop a comfort with over time.
Completely. Yes. In fact, it gets more and more like eye-opening and mind expanding the more you do it. So and you really start to realize that there's no answer to this. There's no one answer. So more questions.
As we think about lots of applications, one of our participants noted that this might be a good intervention or a way that we might encourage people who are experiencing road rage or any of those sort of stimulus that sort of get them fired up about things. Perhaps a little bit of mindfulness could go a long way in perhaps reorienting their thinking about that.
Absolutely, especially on I-40 these days.
Well,
Yes.
this is probably true for many of us. It will be true for me just even today. So, everybody on the call, I'm sure yourself included, we're busy. We have multiple obligations, both personal, professional, and obviously academic. Um, and you've shared a lot of really good practices that I think we can all take with us. Any techniques for just like if you're between classes or between meetings and you need a reset? Just any things that you have found work or that people you work with have commended in terms of how you do that quick reset when you're in between things?
Yes, so the transitions really are the best spaces to start practicing with this because a lot of times when we're moving from one activity or one setting to another, that's when our minds kind of go in that default mode network. We're usually more either future oriented or, what are we going towards and what are we leaving? So that technique, the question of what is now is really, I mean, I have found that to be sort of solid in terms of that gets me into what's happening in this present moment. So, it could be there are too many people in this hallway. I, would rather be walking to this class as opposed to that class. Or I'm really hungry, or this is too noisy. Again, those can be seen as judgments, but when you're doing what is now, when you're doing that practice, it's anything there, and then you can maybe later look back and say, okay, well, what is now, but without being judgmental. It could be that it's noisy. Yes, it's a high-pitched noise. You can also reframe that into something non-judgmental. It's not too noisy, it's just noisy. It's lots of people talking. It's, feet scuffing on the floor. It's whatever it is. It's I notice dread. You can notice the dread about maybe going home, or I notice dread about seeing this particular person, or I notice joy, or I notice, etc., and not have it be judgmental. So I would say the what is now practice has been, because it's just, what is it? Sort of what is here, what is now.
Yeah.
Um, and then also just bringing your attention to your breathing. It's always there. It's always, you're either on an inhale or an exhale. You may be at the top or in between, the transition between those two. So yeah, I would say those two practices are pretty fail-safe.
Good. And then maybe one more. And again, if there's any last minute questions for folks in our chat as we near the end of our time, but if we do this effectively, if we sort of commit to having a practice, again, we're giving ourselves some space to be imperfect, but as we engage in that practice of mindfulness, what are some of the things that help us to know that it's working for us? That we might experience, what we might see in our community? How would an approach of mindfulness sort of contribute positively to that environment?
Yeah, I think it's in some of the dialogue that we have with people who may think differently than us, is where we often see it most rapidly, because we see, oh, I'm able to hear this response from somebody. And it could be our partner or spouse or something, or our child even, but I'm responding in a different way. And so we're able to listen more deeply, likely hearing conversations where there's less reactivity, less anger even, or there's awareness of anger, but it's regulated and it's communicated in a way that there's active listening, etc. So it's really in the relationships that start changing, sort of how we are able to be with other people, that shifts. And just sometimes more of an emphasis on conflict resolution as opposed to just conflict for conflict's sake.
Mhm.
So that's usually where we start. We really start to see it after most people report that it's in their relationships with, people who are in their lives on a daily basis, that's when they start to notice the changes. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I can sort of see the symbiotic relationship there. So sometimes our relationships are the stressors.
yes,
And so we need to think about, how we can maybe constructively contribute to those.
for
This
sure.
has been really wonderful. Thank you for taking the time, sharing with us. Hopefully we all left with some nuggets today that we can use in just sort of processing our everyday lives, be successful in our endeavors, and also remaining mindful and present. Sarah's going to pull up just in a second the additional information for those who are needing the CLE credit. So there will be information there for you. But Dr. Hexall, again, just thank you for